All right, here we go with Psychosocial Development by Erickson. Oh, wait. Hold on a second. That doesn't work out very well. Let's see. That makes it look like Erickson's doing the presentation, and it's not. So let's back that on out there. Yep, get rid of that. We're going to need some room. And there we go. Psychosocial Development by Erickson. He's the guy who came up with the whole theory. And Lesson by Michael Monty, which is me. Hello. Alright, a little bit of background in the beginning, just because you should probably know who Erik Erikson is if you're working on his theory, even though that's not what the lesson's about. He was, well, you can see when he was born and he died. You don't need to know that part. He was an art teacher, though, and he was found there by Anna Freud, Sigmund's daughter, and she thought that he did a good job working with children, and brought him in to be trained as a therapist. And he came up with some rather impressive theory, which was ego-based, the theory of psychosocial development, not psychosexual as her father had done, but social, which is at the very least a little bit easier to talk about in mixed company. Hey. All right. He wrote a book. In addition to his scholarly papers and everything, he got a Pulitzer for writing a book called Gandhi's Truth, which was focused on the adult parts of his theory later on. And he didn't believe that it was that this psychosocial development was exactly age-based. What he thought, it's kind of stage-based, but while the younger stages are pretty closely linked to actual ages, the later on development stages aren't so much. There's no definite period of time when you're going to go through a stage, except for, as example, things that we'll get into later. Because right now we'll talk about the theory a little bit. It's, as I said, it's based or inspired by Freud's psychosexual theory of development. He kind of split it off into a bunch of different stages, and like he doesn't deal with some things like Oedipus complexes, but they do kind of fall in. That does kind of fall into some of the stuff that he talks about later on. Each stage is a battle or a conflict. Both those words are way too strong, but it's a balance, let's say, between two conflicting ideas. In the perfect human, perfect example, both sides would be mastered. It's not an either or. You don't become all of one thing or another, and neither side technically is a failure, because that would be harsh. But they are. It is something that you can achieve both sides in, or that everybody will have a little bit of both sides. You'll make more sense later on. Don't worry about it. All right, and he does leave allowances for culture, because some cultures are more introspective or quieter than others. So, and some role identity issues might be just stronger in some cultures than others. So, no one thing is perfect for everybody. It's just a kind of a ladder that you can track and see how people are advancing. That's all. Here you can see the different stages that we've got, and the ages. The 0 to 1.5 bothers me a lot, but it's I'll go with that. It should be a 0. I didn't make this. The stage 1, trust versus mistrust. And the virtues, as they're called, of hope, will, purpose, competency, fidelity, love, care, wisdom. He references those. They're awfully, I feel, weighted on the happy end of the scale. And I think we can all agree that the happier people will be towards the happier end. So why not focus on that side when you're writing it all down? But if everyone's going to have some of these in them, then, maybe not focus on the virtue so much and just focus on what they refer to as the crisis. So trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame, initiative versus guilt, industry versus inferiority. You can see the rest of these right here. And it's a pretty interesting way of thinking about development, human personal development, because these are conflicts, these are thoughts that everybody has as they are progressing through life. And I know I did not think of them as such core issues as they are. But they are the kind of things that do keep you up at night. So now you got that going for you, which is nice. All right, so first is at infancy. You can't get much younger than that and do any thinking. And that's trust versus mistrust. And, obviously a little bit beyond infancy, but there's mistrust throughout. The essential truthfulness of others, as well as a fundamental sense of one's trustworthiness. All that is saying is that when you are an infant, up through at least when you're 18 months, if not maybe years longer, you are learning kind of what other people are good for, how much you can trust them, how much you can trust anything, quite honestly. There's the whole theory of persistence of memory, where, you can, when you don't see something, is it still there? That's trusting the universe around you, or when you're a little kid, mistrusting the universe around you. It's not there anymore. Strike that, reverse it. In this particular instance, trust is not a good thing. Well, it is a good thing, but it's not the sole good thing. And mistrust is not the sole bad thing. It's good to mistrust sometimes, especially when you're a kid. That quarter did not, in fact, come out of your ear. And you can mistrust Grandpa for saying it. And that gives you a healthy dose of skepticism, which is going to help you out in the future. Although, even though that's a good thing, if your caregiver, if your adult, if your person who's in charge of you is completely unresponsive, is very mistrustful, then you will learn to not like people. And that's one of the negative side effects that can come from this, is an overall mistrust of humanity. And varying levels of that happen, but you can see how you can be too trustworthy, not too trustworthy, but too trusting, or too mistrusting, and either one of those, all the way on the end, are not good things. And a very gullible person who just sees a good in everyone, Pollyanna times 10, is not going to be great. Neither is a person who doesn't trust anyone. So you want to be leveled out on both of these. As I said, a healthy dose of skepticism, as well as, realizing that the world, the predictability of the world, how it all works out. Very important. All right. Then, as you get a little bit older, and I know the other slide said 18 months, but doesn't necessarily have to be 18 months. It's all wiggle room here. But you're a little bit older when you start working on autonomy. And obviously, if you can't clothe yourself, you're not going to be very autonomous. But you will be, as you start to, go to the bathroom and communicate with other people, decide if you like music, then you're developing yourself as a human, tiny human, but human nonetheless. And that's what's going to help you out deciding who you are. It snowballs later on, in some of the later lessons. But this is the core part of it. And now that you've learned whether or not to trust or mistrust things that are going on around you, you're learning how to interact with things. How to, do you trust that when you put something on top of the table, it won't fall to the ground? And you start stacking blocks. That's how it works. If you mistrust them, you might never stack a block in your life. That's pretty dull, and, Legos have little pegs to help you out with that, but you just, it could happen. All right, so you start to work on yourself, get everything going there. You're starting to make decisions, is what it is. You're, picking out your clothes, and, if you're 2, you're picking out terrible clothes, probably the clothes with the duck on them, because you like ducks. And that's okay. You're still making those decisions. Now, part of what Erickson is saying, is that if you're never given the ability to make your own decisions, then as you get older in life, you might have low self-esteem, saying that you're just not equipped to make decisions. You might not trust yourself in that particular instance because it was never a learned thing. And that's possible. I've seen it, personally, I've seen it go both ways. Where if you're not allowed to make your decisions as a kid, either A, you never make a decision again, or B, you make horrible decisions because you never learn to live with consequences. It's everything here is your balance here. Autonomy versus shame. And of course, if you make bad decisions, that's the shame versus doubt side. Things that you are unhappy with the results of, then you're going to, I would argue, learn a good lesson from that too. So both these sides, again, are very important. Either A, you make your own decisions and you act on them, or B, you make your own decisions and you feel bad about them. But either way, it's a learning experience. You're picking up from where you left off and you're moving forward. It's pretty cool. All right, initiative versus guilt is the third stage. You're a little bit older still. You're starting to not just deal with your parents and the inanimate objects around your house, maybe a dog. You're starting to work with small groups of other people your same age. Playing in playgrounds, playing in sandboxes. It's not just you stacking blocks or staring at unstacked blocks. It's you building a sandcastle with some friends. And so you're starting to make plans. You're starting to work with other people. You're starting to have social interactions with them. All things, which are bullet points on here. So what you're doing here is you're developing self-confidence, possibly, a sense of purpose, leadership roles, starting to just barely starting to come to the fore. If you are terrible with people, or if your parents say don't let you interact with people, that's when the negative side of this stage starts to come. Another low, not just low self-esteem, but also self-confidence becomes lacking at this point if you're not able to stretch and work with other people. And that's a thing. But as I said here, barring the low self-confidence part, working with other people to either having it work out and everything is wonderful, or realizing that some people you don't want to work with, that's also a learning, that's also learning lessons. That's also making you smarter and better as a person, more established in your personality. And you can see how all this is still building together to create a person. Pretty cool. All right, industry versus inferiority. Now, I will repeat that because I said it way too fast. Industry versus inferiority. Now you're in school. It's not just making small plans and building small things. You are figuring out exactly who you are in the group. If you watch preschoolers, because even kindergartners start to get this going, but if you watch preschoolers and the 3 to 5 set, you'll see they all just kind of wing it. They're all just playing in the playground, sometimes with each other, sometimes not. As they start getting older, they start assuming roles, leadership roles, things like that. And that's where your industry, your child that's going to be more industrious is going to take on more work, start to think of themselves, compare themselves against other children. So, I am a good worker. He is not a good worker. I am a person who, smells. That person does not smell. These are things that they start to realize at this age. And it can, as you can see here, the inferiority part of it, it can bring them down. If I am a child who does not get to wear clean clothes, then you are a child who's going to feel a little inferior to other children. It's sad, but that's how that goes. Now, it's also good as a child to realize that there are some people who may be smarter than you. That's the good side of inferiority. Maybe I know I have to be more industrious. I have to work harder because I have other deficiencies. And if they're figuring this out, then this is a very good landing pad, base point for the education system, because they start to see themselves as a person who has to do work or doesn't have to do work, who had natural ability, or I want to learn how to swim so that I can swim. I'm not very good at it. It all kind of goes together there. Everything builds to the middle point here, which is identity versus role confusion. Now they're, preteens, teenagers, this whole area of time. It's all kind of fluid. And I've got 10-year-olds in my class that are dead in the center of identity versus role confusion. And I'm sure there's, 16, 17-year-olds that haven't even thought about it yet because, I don't know, girls are icky. But, so identity versus role confusion is what they're doing there. Everything is built up to this point. They now are figuring out exactly who they are, who do they want to be, what do they want to do for a living. This is when they're coming to people. A lot of teachers that I've talked to really like teaching middle school, and they also really dislike teaching middle school. Oftentimes, same teacher, same school, because you've got students that are really starting to come into their own and figure out who they are. But at the same time, you've also got a lot of students who are flailing around and trying to figure out who they are so that they can come into their own. So it's a lot of work. This stage right here, it's good that everything builds up to this stage because this is vital. This is where you start making the decisions that are affecting you for your entire life. So you kind of, according to Erickson, want to have a pretty good ground point at this level. You really want to have a good sense of identity so that you can build on the things that you've learned about yourself and go from there. You really don't want to have spent your life in a box and not done very much, because if you're trying to figure everything out now after having skipped a few stages, let's say, it's a lot of work and you will not be a healthy adult. A lot of times kids have difficulties with their parents in this stage because this is where all the fighting happens, because you are figuring out who you are, and it may or may not be who your parents were or what they envisioned for you. All right. Intimacy versus isolation. Now we're getting into, people out of school. Erickson, had kind of expected this to be in your 20s through up to your early 40s. Nowadays, it could be anything because it's when you start to make these decisions, quite honestly. Some people put off marriage, put off dating, put serious thought until after college. Some people start it when they're 14. So you just never know, as I said, which age level these things start to take place. But you can see them in people. You can kind of see how it's coming together. So these are people who have kind of figured out what they want to do with their life, what kind of job they want to work in, or not. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, knowing what job you want. But they do know what kind of people they kind of want to be. And they start focusing on intimate relationships. So that's what this is all about. It's whether or not you want to put the work in to be with a person, or you like being alone, or you just don't like noise, you like the quiet, or things like that. It does, after having put everything together in the most recent stage, this is really the one that sets the tone for everything that comes afterwards, because you know who you want to be, but now you have to figure out kind of how you want to get there and who you want to be there with. All right. And then generativity, which I am not at all convinced is an actual word, but Erickson uses it, versus stagnation, which is now that you've decided whether or not you want to be with people, especially that special someone, whether or not you want to be with someone, and who you are, now you are working on being a productive member of society. And this is Erickson starts this phase in your early 40s. You could be doing this in your 20s. You could almost, I would argue, you could be doing this at the same time as when you are working on intimacy and isolation, because these aren't, islands in the ocean here. These are conversations that people have with themselves, consciously, subconsciously, throughout adulthood. So it's It's definitely not something that is just one after the other after the other. There's overlap. There's thoughts. There's processes going on. This is when you start also thinking about not just your productivity in the job, in the workforce, but also in the family. And will you have kids? Which is another reason why I think the 40s is a bit too old to be put a date stamp on this, because a lot of people have that conversation in their 20s and 30s. I would almost argue sometimes before they've figured out what they want to do for a living. They're deciding whether or not they want to have kids, and making everything else fit. But I digress. This particular stage right here, generativity versus stagnation, is all about planning for the future. And there are some people who do not want to have kids, who do not want to have like crazy high paying jobs, with lots of work and effort and stuff like that. There are some people who are happy where they are, and that's another instance where neither one of these is 100% good or 100% bad. Every part of this makes up people and who they are. All right. So you're going to have a little bit of both. People have a little bit of both. Some people want to work really hard and not have a family. There you go. That's both generativity and stagnation in the same person, and that is perfectly okay. And then the last stage is integrity versus despair. Integrity is a harsh word for this, but it is the one that Erickson uses. It's about looking back at your life and deciding if you became the person that you wanted to be, and being from there. And despair is also very harsh, and some people are let down by who they've become, but they might not despair it. That's just that's a bit much in my book, but that's okay. That's a lot of should have beens and would haves and what if kind of conversations that people can have with each other, or with themselves, and hopefully in this particular instance, people are they feel like they've been full of integrity and done the thing that they want to do. Erickson's wife, whose name I blank out on right now, said that there was a 9th stage. Apparently at any time, usually the later adult times though, you can freak out and redo everything. That'd be your midlife crises. And that's possible. I can see that. In fact, there's a part of me that almost puts these last 4 stages, the integrity, despair, generativity versus stagnation, intimacy versus isolation, and identity versus role confusion. You could almost, at any time in adulthood, smash all these up and do them all together. Because that really is what a midlife crisis is. That's refiguring out everything based on the stuff that you thought you knew when you were a kid, and realizing that the only way that you'll ever feel good about yourself is if you drive a Ferrari. All right. Well, that's the end of this lecture here. I hope you enjoyed it. It was kind of fun. I've not done this kind of thing before. So if you would, write a 1-paragraph summary of what you've learned and send it to your teacher, care of, I'm not really your teacher, but good luck to you in this class.com.